Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, I should say. I guess we're still early. Day's getting away from me. This is Danielle with the California Air Resources Board, and I wanted to go ahead and do a quick 5-minute sound check. We will be getting started right at 10:30. So if you can hear me clearly, if you can go ahead and type into the GoToWebinar chat panel, just saying, yes, audio is coming through, we would appreciate it. And like I said, we'll be getting started at 10:30. So hold tight. Be here soon. Thanks. Good morning, everyone. This is Danielle with the California Air Resources again. We're going to go ahead and get started with the webinar. So thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your morning to attend the school bus fleet webinar and learn a little more about what the requirements are and what funding sources are available. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into this here. We're going to cover quite a few different topics today. So we're showing the fleet webinar topics now. So we're going to start with a very brief health background slide, just one slide, and then we'll go into the regulatory requirements. From there, we're going to cover some of the current funding opportunities available for school buses. We're going to go over a very brief overview of electric school buses, and then we're going to pass it on to some of our guests here and go over some fleet case studies. So this is really the exciting part of our webinar. We're so thankful to have Tim and Patrick here to just give us an overview of their experience adding zero-emission school buses to their fleet. And so this will all probably take us about an hour, and then from there, we'll have a half an hour for questions. So as questions come in, as long as they're on topic of where we are in the presentation, we can go ahead and answer those throughout. But if we start getting too many questions, then we might have to hold them to the end. But we will be able to respond to everyone's questions, whether live on the webinar or over the GoToWebinar question panel.
Hi, this is Jerry Baruman with the Air Resources Board. I'm helping Danielle today. I just want to let everybody know that we did email out the presentation this morning, as well as a copy of a handout portion of the presentation. If you were registered by last night, then you should have gotten that this morning. If you registered anytime after this morning and you didn't get it, you can still download those PDFs. They're on your right-hand side of your GoToWebinar screen there. There's a handout button. You can just click them there and get them downloaded through there. And again, please use the question function if you want to ask a question anytime during the webinar. We do have folks here in the room that are answering questions live. So if you send in a question, we'll do our best to answer it here. You might not hear it over the audio, but we will answer them over the hard connection here. So that's all I got. I'm going to throw it back over to Danielle.
All right, and we're going to go ahead and get started. We're just going to take a little bit of time to talk about particulate matter and how it affects children's health, really everyone's health. We know it adversely affects human health, especially the sensitive portions of our population, such as children. There's a children's health study conducted in 1992, so this isn't a recent health study, but it did confirm that exposure to high concentrations of PM reduces lung development, and not only does it have immediate adverse health effects, but with continued exposure, it has lasting health effects later in life. Continued research has shown, as with the children's school bus exposure study in 2003, that exposure is greatly affected by the bus's own exhaust, and the oldest, dirtiest buses, they do have the highest rates of in-vehicle exposure. So additionally, ARB has sponsored mitigation studies to research additional ways to reduce in-cabin exposure. So as a result of these findings, ARB has taken several actions to reduce children's exposure related to the pollutants during their school bus trips. So some of the big things in terms of regulatory requirements is that all school buses are required to have particulate matter exhaust filters or limit the miles operated. There are restrictions on school bus idling, and also routine maintenance and routine smoke tests are required on traditional diesel school buses. So with that, I'm not going to go into too much detail on these requirements, and I'm going to hand it over to Jerry to talk more about the regulatory requirements for both school buses and white fleet vehicles.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jerry Baruman. I'm with the Air Resources Board, as you see here. I've given you my email address in case you have questions later on. You can send me an email directly. I've been working for the Air Resources Board. I'm going on about 6 years now. I do have a background working with enforcement with the Air Resources Board, so that's why I'm kind of giving you the regulatory requirements of the school buses. So when we say what school buses are regulated, we're talking about the truck and bus regulation. That's the big one here with that everyone's probably concerned about. If you have a diesel school bus that operates in California and it's over 14,000 pounds GVWR or gross vehicle weight rating, whether you're a public or private school and you transport pupils to and from school and or school activities per the California Vehicle Code section 545, then you fall into the school bus provision of the truck and bus regulation. If you do not meet all of these criteria, and the last one there, the transports pupils to and from school and or school activities, then you don't fall into the school bus provision of truck and bus regulation. You fall into the regular provisions of the truck and bus regulation. So even if you have a yellow bus and it's got the name of the school on the side, but you don't meet the definition that's in California Vehicle Code section 545, then that bus needs to be meeting regular provisions of the California truck and bus regulation. So if you do meet these provisions and you are a school bus, then here's your requirements. You should be either at 100% filtered, your fleet should be 100% filtered by now, and any 1977 or earlier school buses have to be retired. They cannot be on the road anymore in California. If you had an extension for unavailability of any type of filtration system, or if you had a two-stroke engine, then you did get an extension. However, that extension has expired. So if you think you're still using that extension, that expired in January of 2018. So those buses, the only way they can be on the road currently in California is by staying under 1,000 miles a year, and you have to keep documentation of that. And that's what brings us into the next provision here, which is called low-use school buses. That's your only provision that you can use for those school buses you had on the unavailability or two-stroke extension. And again, the record keeping for school buses that meet the definition of the California Vehicle Code are, you have to maintain your records internally, and if the Air Resources Board does ask you for those records, you have to be able to provide them. You do not have to report voluntarily, though, like a vehicle that is in the regular provisions of the California truck and bus regulation. Let's talk a little bit about the white fleet. That means the vehicles that aren't school buses, but most school districts have diesel vehicles that are not school buses but service the school district. If it's part of a publicly owned school district, then you fall into the public agency utility rule, not the white fleet would fall into that rule, not the truck and bus regulation. So that would be any on-road diesel vehicle that's over 14,000 GVWR, has to have a model year engine between 1960 or 2006, and like I said, you would be subject to the public agency rule. However, in 2021, all those vehicles that were in the public agency rule get to be part of the truck and bus regulation at that point, because the public agency rule sunsets at that point. So by 2012, if you were part of the public agency utility regulation, you had to have your filters 100% filtered fleet by 2012. There were some delayed compliance schedules. There's the low use option. Again, you have to keep those records, and you have to actually label your equipment and your vehicles. There is a labeling requirement for that. We won't get too much into what that is because everyone's going to have a different scenario. But if you do have questions on that, you can give us an email, send us an email, or ask us questions here on the chat, on the question function of the GoToWebinar. If you are a private company that has a white fleet, then you fall into the regular provisions of the truck and bus regulation. So basically, if you have a diesel vehicle that's over 14,000 pounds GVWR, you would have to follow either the model year schedule, or if you're using any flexibility options, the only one that really is available at this point now is the low use option, and currently it's at less than 5,000 miles per calendar year overall, or less than 1,000 in California. And if you sell a vehicle that's subject to the truck and bus regulation, you must provide the purchaser with a sales disclosure, and I gave you the web link there. You should be able to hover over it on your screen with your mouse right now, and it should open that hyperlink for you. If not, it is provided in the handouts that we emailed out. Here's a copy of the model year schedule for the light duty vehicles. And a light duty vehicle would be any vehicle, diesel vehicle operated in California with a GVWR greater than 14,000 pounds up to 26,000 pounds. So if you hit 26,000 pounds even, you're still part of the light duty. If you have 26,001, then you fall into heavy duty. There were no filter requirements for light duty vehicles, and I know some people think they get excited to hear that because they think, oh, I'm okay. Well, there's no filter requirements, but there is turnover requirements for light duty vehicles, and I have a schedule up here for you to examine. If you have a vehicle that's in this category and you have to check your emission control label to find your engine year. But if you have any vehicle in this category that has an engine year of 1998 or older, you had to have turned that over by January 1, 2018. You already have turnover requirements for those vehicles. The only option you would have is the low use option that I mentioned earlier, which is currently it is less than 5,000 miles a calendar year overall, or less than 1,000 miles a calendar year in California. But the bad news is, if you didn't know about that and you weren't following this schedule, and let's say you have a 1997 mile year engine in your light duty vehicle, and in 2017 you went 10,000 miles, you can no longer opt into that low use. I mean, if you went 3,000 miles with your 97 in 2017 and 3,000 miles every year before that, and you can document that, you have documentation. Even if you didn't report those previously, you still can contact the diesel hotline and work with them to get into this provision. However, like I said, if you went over that mileage, then the low use option is not available to you at this point. The only option would be to turn over that vehicle, retire that vehicle, or get it out of the state and replace it with a vehicle with a 2010 engine or newer. Now I see we're getting a lot of questions, Danielle. Is there anything that we could address over the audio, or are you taking care of those?
There's a few that I think would be good if we talked about. I didn't scroll down the page here. But if you could please define the white fleet again.
All right. So the white fleet, that's kind of the terminology used in the industry. The school districts use this terminology. The white fleet is anything that doesn't meet. Basically, it's anything that doesn't meet the definition of a school bus in the California Vehicle Code. So if you're using any, let's say, box trucks, refrigerated box trucks to deliver school lunches to your schools throughout your district, it's a diesel box truck and it weighs, 24,000 pounds GVWR, and it's diesel, it runs in California, then that would be part of your white fleet. And that would follow, you would have to follow, if it's publicly owned, it would have to follow the Public Agency Utilities regulation requirements. If it's a privately owned, if you're contracting with a privately owned company, then that company would have to be following the truck and bus requirements for the light duty vehicles that I just went over.
And then one more question is, someone asked if you could just go over the fact that there is an exemption for NOx exempt vehicles under truck and bus, and so school buses that are under that provision, truck and bus that have a DPF installed would not have to replace the bus.
Yes, it's okay. Yeah, there is a NOx exemption. However, if your school bus meets the definition of a school bus per the California Vehicle Code, once you put a DPF filter on that bus, it's compliant with the truck and bus regulation and does not have a turnover requirement. So regardless of whether you're in the NOx exempt area or not in the NOx exempt area. Now, if your school bus is yellow and it has the school name on there, but you don't meet the definition of a school bus per the California Vehicle Code, then yes, you still would be okay with the no turnover requirement if you had a DPF filter installed on that school bus, and the school bus was only traveling in NOx designated NOx exempt areas of California. It never exits that area. Then yes, then it would not have a turnover requirement as well. But that would be the only way. If it ever comes out of the NOx exempt area, then it would have a turnover requirement. So you can't sell that bus to a different school district and say it's forever compliant with the truck and bus regulation and be okay. All right, so let me talk a little bit. If we get more questions, we'll handle it as they come in. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about White Fleet. We're going to talk about the heavy duty schedule, the schedule for the heavy duty vehicles. So that's any diesel vehicle operated in California greater than 26,000 pounds GVWR. So anything 26,001, actually 26,000.0001 or greater, then you fall into this requirement. And this does have a filter requirement on here. So if you had like if we go back to our box truck example, and you had a box truck with a 1999 model year engine that was a diesel, then January 1, 2012, you should have installed a PM filter on that vehicle, and that would give you all the way to January 1, 2020 before you have a turnover requirement. Now, that vehicle could be traveling less than 5,000 miles a year, total, and it could be using a low use exemption instead of installing a DPF filter. And as long as it stays under whatever the low use mileage requirement is by January 2021, it will definitely be less than 1,000 miles for truck and bus. Then it can continue operating without a filter or a turnover requirement. But it has to be currently compliant. So it can't have already blown mileage. Once it blows, if it ever blows the mileage, then it can never go back into low use. So it doesn't reset. The low use doesn't reset every year. If you go over the maximum threshold, then you're out of that vehicle is out of that option forever. But if you can stay that, and if it has stayed under that, then you can use that without a turnover requirement. But the schedule is pretty straightforward. You just look at your emission control label, find your model year of your engine, and you follow the schedule to see when your turnover requirement or your filter requirement deadlines are. Now, again, we're way past all the filter requirement deadlines. So you'd be looking at your 2010 model year engine turnover requirements. Oop, wrong way. Any questions on that, Danielle, that you see there? Okay. It's not advancing for me. Can you? There we go. Thank you very much. Now, another requirement that school districts might be facing and might not realize it is our the off-road regulation. Now, I know that a lot of school districts have warehouses where they store a lot of their equipment. They store, they do whatever they have, and they have forklifts running those warehouses, pulling pallets, moving equipment, doing whatever the case might be. Those forklifts, if they're diesel forklifts and they're over a certain horsepower, then they would fall into the off-road regulation. The off-road regulation does not have it is across the board, whether you're a publicly or privately owned company. It is the same across the board. So if you have a single engine, self-propelled 25 horsepower or greater diesel-powered piece of equipment that falls into this requirement, then you need to be following off-road requirements. There are some exemptions there's again a low use, and this one follows in less than 200 hours per year requirement. There are some dedicated snow removal vehicle requirements, and that might come into play for some of the school districts that are up in the hills, up in the mountains. But there are reporting and labeling requirements. If your equipment does fall under this, you do need to report it into the DOORS reporting system. You need to label both sides of the equipment, and again, there's a sales disclosure provision on this one as well. So we do have an entire training course dedicated to this regulation, and I put a link down there. In May, we're going to have, it's called our course 504 off-road vehicles, and we're going to have a webinar on May 17th. You can register for the webinar down at the bottom of this slide. If you hover over that, you should be able to open that hyperlink and register. There's fleet, the equipment falls into fleet size categories. Here's the table, there's small, medium, and large. So every scenario is different. We wanted to give you this information, put this on your radar, so if you want to come back and ask us questions on this, you can, but this webinar is more dedicated to school buses, so we're going to stay on that topic a little bit more, but we do want to put this on your radar. Now, there is one more regulation that you might be subject to and not realize. It's called our large spark ignition, and those are basically forklifts that aren't diesel. So your propane forklifts, and it's other equipment as well that's not diesel that you might be using in warehouses. You might be using for football fields. You might be, you might be using it and not realize you're using it and be regulated by these requirements. So we just want to put this on your radar so that you know about them, and we do have information if you want to follow up with us a little bit later or after the webinar itself. Now, let's talk a little bit about, you have to do your annual smoke capacity testing. You should be doing that every year for all your diesel vehicles that are 4 years older. So let's say you have a 2015 diesel vehicle that's over, and this one is actually, it's any diesel vehicle operated in California over 6,000 pounds GVWR. If it's not falling into California's smog check program, then it falls into the periodic smoke inspection program. And you count the years by saying if you have a 2015 model year engine, you would say 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018. So 2019 would be your first smoke check for that vehicle. You have to maintain, you have to make sure you're maintaining your emission control labels on your engines. Make sure you're not tampering with any filtration systems, and there are idling limitations for all your diesel vehicles in California. Unless they are part of the California Clean Idling Program, you have to shut those engines off after 5 minutes of non-necessary idling in California. And then school buses, we have a different, and school zones, we have different idling requirements. You must, immediately upon arriving or at or within 100 feet of a school boundary, a school district boundary or residence, you have to turn off you can't idle at all. You have to shut down the engine immediately. And you cannot restart that engine more than 30 seconds before departing that area. So, and this applies to all commercial vehicles. If you have any delivery trucks coming in, any maintenance trucks coming in, they all have to follow this. And that means if a truck or a piece of equipment is parked outside the football field, but it's still part of the school boundary, that's still within 100 feet. It still has to be turned off immediately. No idling at all within school boundaries. So Danielle, do we have any questions?
We have no questions at this time.
Okay. I don't know what happened here.
It's on here.
Okay.
The thing is kind of something happened with the program or something.
So like I said, if you have any questions, do you think of anything after this webinar, please email us. You can reply to the email you received earlier today. You could call our diesel hotline. We're always But I'm going to, at this point, if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to turn it over to Danielle. She's going to talk a little bit about probably what everyone's here to hear about is the state's funding for California school buses.
I think I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
All right. So I should have introduced myself, I guess, the first time I started talking, but my name is Danielle Lawrence, previously Chambers, so I recently changed my name. I worked at the California Air Resources Board for a little over 8 years now, primarily on truck and bus regulatory compliance and training, but now I'm getting a lot more into school buses and assisting school bus fleets. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into the funding for school buses, as long as I can get the slides to move forward here. There's always something with these computers. They have a mind of their own, I think. To the next slide.
See a page down that doesn't advance. Huh. Our system froze up here.
It looks like I'm able to advance it on the slide, maybe?
If you're on the webinar, we're going to put you on hold for just a second so we can take care. We have a technical difficulty at the moment, but we will be right back. Don't log off.
All right, I think that we've got this figured out here. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the funding sources for school buses. So starting in 2001, CARB and the local districts have spent over $500 million to clean up school buses by retrofitting or replacing the oldest buses in the state. So CARB, air districts, and other state agencies continue to make school bus cleanup a priority and continue to invest in school buses. So this slide shows some of the current and upcoming school bus funding sources, and you can see we do have quite a few new sources on the slide highlighted with that little new picture there. So we're going to go ahead and touch on all of these sources and go into more detail. So we're going to start with the Hybrid Voucher Incentive Program. So this program is not only for school buses, but it helps all fleets buy hybrid or battery electric trucks and buses. There's $133 million available for the 2017-18 fiscal year. And on the HVIP website, there's actually a little ticker that shows how much money is remaining in the program, so you can go see at any time. This program is first come, first served, and it covers the incremental cost of adding a new vehicle to the fleet. So the program is intended to address the barrier of those high incremental costs of the new technologies in the early market years. For school bus purchases, fleets can get up to $220,000 per bus, plus an additional $15,000 if operating in a disadvantaged community. School bus fleets can apply for a voucher directly through the dealership or manufacturer. The process is streamlined and straightforward, and the dealership will be submitting the application and request the voucher on behalf of the purchaser. So for more information on the qualifying school buses, qualifying technology, and approved dealerships and manufacturers, you can visit the HVIP website that's listed on the slide. The next program we're going to talk about is the Rural School Bus Pilot Project. And this is a relatively new funding source. So the main goal of this program is to accelerate the turnover of old California school buses to lower carbon transportation choices. So this is especially for rural school districts that have less access to other funding sources, although any school districts can apply, even if they are outside of those rural school districts. The program is administered through North Coast Unified Air Quality Management District, and it's part of what's called the California Climate Investment. So this is a statewide initiative that puts the California cap and trade dollars at work to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve public health and the environment, particularly in the disadvantaged communities. So projects that are funded by this source, they have to demonstrate GHG and black carbon reduction. So the project types, they're going to include either zero-emission school bus technology or hybrid or internal combustion engines that use renewable fuels. The funding is prioritized to the applicants that are in small air districts that have the oldest buses with the most miles. So how this program works is that a fleet could get up to 3 zero-emission technology buses, and that would be for up to $400,000 each, and with an additional $5,000 for the charging infrastructure, or they could apply for one hybrid or internal combustion engine, and that would be for up to $165,000, and that would require that they're using renewable fuels. So for fiscal year 16-17, $15 million was available, and with this, there were 30 electric school bus funded. There were also 7 hybrid internal combustion engines that were using renewable fuels, and these buses are currently in the process of being delivered if they haven't already been. For fiscal year 2018-19, there's an additional $10 million available, and this will be available once the grant agreement is in place. An open solicitation will take time sometime this spring. So for more information, you can visit the North Coast Unified Air Quality Management website there. And this is actually once the solicitation is open, you will also apply through their website. So the next program we're going to talk about is the Carl Moyer program, and this program has actually been around for some time now. And it is a partnership between CARB, the Air Resources Board, and the local air districts. So this program, it's incentive grants for cleaner than required engines and equipment. So this means that the engines and equipment that's added to the fleet or funded under the program would have to be above and beyond the requirements of the regulations that Jerry covered. So how it works is CARB sets program guidelines, and the district selects projects based on the local needs. So it is a competitive program. The grant amounts are going to vary, and it depends on the project type, how much pollution is reduced, and the cost of the project. The guidelines for this program, they were recently amended to allow greater flexibility or eligibility for school bus projects. So school buses are just one of the many categories of equipment that can be funded under CARB. So traditionally, school bus projects, they were not very cost effective based on low miles operated in comparison. And the cost calculations, they were updated to make school buses more fundable for districts. So as I already mentioned, the program is early or extra. So the fleet has to meet all regulatory requirements before they would be eligible for this funding. And to apply, you would need to contact your local air district or visit your local air district website to check for an open application period. So the next source of funding we're going to talk about is one of the newer sources of funding out there. So this is AB 617, and it's called the Community Air Protection Fund. So in 2017, Governor Brown signed legislation appropriating $250 million to achieve early action emission reductions in communities that are most affected by air pollution. So for the first year, Community Air Protection Funds, they're going to provide the immediate reductions through the CARB program. So the intention is to really expedite the use of this funding. School bus replacements are an eligible project type. So how this funding works, or is going to work, is 95% of the funds are going to be going to the 3 largest air districts in the state. That's going to include the Bay Area, the San Joaquin Valley, and the South Coast Air Quality Management Districts. Remaining funds will be split between the medium and small districts in the state as well. And this program, it's really in the middle of the public process, and we're in the beginning phases now, although the funding is currently available. So workshops were conducted early this year, so in February, and proposed supplemental guidelines, and the guidelines are supplemental to the CARB program. They have been posted online, and they're going to be heard at the board meeting that's actually next week. There's a public comment docket that is available online, so if you have any comments on those supplemental guidelines online and how the funds are being used, then you can go ahead and provide your comments. So if you have questions or comments on the public process itself for this funding, you can go to the CAP, or Community Air Protection Fund's website that's listed on this slide. But if you're actually interested in applying for these funds, you can apply through your local air district. The districts do already have grant agreements in place. The big 3 air districts do, and they're currently selecting projects at this time. So they are continuing to engage with their community groups to determine what types of projects are the best. But we have gotten some feedback from both Bay Area and the San Joaquin Valley that they are encouraging school bus fleets to apply as soon as possible. So as I had mentioned earlier, CARB, which is following the guidelines of CARB, is a first come, first served program. So, I mean, the message really is for those districts and all districts that you want to get your applications in as soon as possible to make sure that there is some funding available. So you want to go to your local air district website, or give them a call or shoot them an email to apply for that funding. So I did mention that the grant agreements are already in place for these 3 air districts, but the medium air districts, they're in the process of getting those grant agreements signed so they can start distributing funds, and then it will move on to the small districts as well. So it's something that you want to pay attention to and keep up on so that you don't miss out on the funds. All right, the next program we're going to cover is the Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Trust. So this has kind of been a hot topic, I guess, over the past year or a few years here. So the VW Environmental Mitigation Trust, this is a court-ordered $3 billion national trust. $423 million is for California to mitigate excess NOx emissions that were caused by VW's use of illegal defeat devices in certain vehicles. So for this, there is a trust agreement that outlines that school bus replacements are an eligible project type. California, they have to go through and develop what's called a beneficiary mitigation plan before the state can expend any of the funds from its allocation of this trust. So there is a public process currently underway. There's already been 7 public workshops conducted throughout the state, and as with the 617 funds I just talked about, there is a public comment docket available online for this program as well. So staff is currently working on a beneficiary mitigation plan to talk about how the funding would be spent, and that's going to be presented at the CARB board meeting next month. So for more information on this program, you can visit the website available on the slide here. And the next source of funding we're going to talk about is called Prop 39 School Bus Replacement Program. This program is administered through the California Energy Commission, and SB 110 appropriates $75 million to replace school buses. So the priority is going to be for the oldest buses operating in disadvantaged and low-income communities in the state. And there's also a component that will apply to the charging infrastructure and workforce training and development. So as with the last 2 programs I covered, this one is also in the midst of the public process. So the CEC had held workshops earlier this year, and they have proposed there should be a solicitation release sometime in the May-June timeframe. So to apply for this program and to keep updated on it, you want to visit their website as well. And actually, for all 3 of these programs that I covered, you'd want to get on their email listserv so that you're updated as soon as there are any big changes to these programs. So the next source of funding we're going to talk about is really it's local air district funds. So local air districts, they can use their funds to fund school bus cleanup projects. So we encourage you to contact them to get specific information and see what is available in your district. So one example that we wanted to point out that is pretty cool is how South Coast AQMP, they use their vehicle registration fees, which many districts do use their vehicle registration fees to fund school bus projects, but they use them to match the HVIP funding. So as we talked about HVIP a few slides back, that was to cover the incremental costs of electric buses. So they use their fees to match that funding. And with that, they were able to order 33 zero-emission school buses and infrastructure for 18 school districts in their air district and environmental justice communities. So these buses, they'll be delivered to the schools sometime by September of this year. And so we're going to move on to another source of funding, which is actually a newer source to us that we recently found out about it. But this is AB 1082. And AB 1082, this directs the California Public Utilities Commission to accept applications from the 6 investor-owned utilities in the state for pilot projects to install electric vehicle infrastructure at schools and educational facilities. So the utilities will be required to submit applications by July of this year, and the CPUC will make a decision on those applications by the end of this year. So as many of these programs, the priority is given to facilities in disadvantaged communities, but what you would want to do is contact your utility for more information. So if you are looking into electric vehicles and you want to look into the infrastructure as well and getting some assistance with that, it's a good idea to contact your utility and see if they are participating in this program. There's also some California Public Utilities contacts. So if you want more information that your utility can't provide, then you can contact Carrie or Audrey at the CPUC. All right, so that is going to conclude our portion on funding, and we're going to move into the electric school bus overview. And what I have to say in terms of electric school buses is going to be very brief, and I'm going to pass it over to our guest speakers here, which I'm sure everyone is excited to hear from. So just just really briefly, some of the benefits to electric school buses. We know they have a big impact on environmental and public health, zero emissions, and the air quality benefits not only apply to the general population, but possibly more importantly to the riders and the drivers of those buses that are on them every day. And it is a sustainable transportation source. Both riders and drivers benefit. And I'm going to leave some of that out for our guests here to talk about. But some things that you want to take into consideration as well when deciding if electric bus will work for your fleet. You want to look at the route. You're going to want to look into route profiles and how those will work for you, as well as charging infrastructure. So working with your utility, working with the manufacturer of the bus to determine what's going to be necessary for your situation. Maintenance and training are big things that you'll want to look at, because it's going to be different than what you may have been used to before the electric buses, and what the drivers are used to as well. And then finally, cost. So cost is going to be, it's going to be a big factor that you're looking at. So aside from the grant programs we discussed, determining what will work, getting your local utility on board to assist with infrastructure, and then what types of fuel savings you'll be looking at as well. Some fleets are even going into generating carbon credits and revenue generation through vehicle to grid. So all of these things, they can be discussed with the manufacturer that you choose to work with. There are multiple manufacturers of electric school buses, so I have them listed on the slide here with links to their website. Many of them have vendors that you can work with as well to get a personalized experience and see what is going to be the best for your fleet. So we can get some real life situations here. I'm going to pass it on. So our first speaker today is Tim Shannon. Tim deploys the largest quantity of electric buses in the nation for a school district. And he is local here at the Twin Rivers Unified School District. He also collaborates and participates in programs with local, state, and federal agencies to promote improved air quality and expands knowledge of other school districts as well as the public. He is the recipient of the 2017 Clean Air Champion Public Fleet Award from the Sacramento Clean Cities Coalition. So, Tim, thank you so much for being here today and for giving us some insight on your experience.
Well, thank you for having me, and good morning, everyone. I'm just going to give you a little overview about our district. We are a 127 square mile urban and rural school district. We have 61 schools. We have an 87.9% free and reduced lunch. We are heavy in the disadvantaged community. We're also a Title I school district. We have 30,000 students. We transport approximately 5,900 kids per day. 900 of those are special needs students. We have 131 school buses in our fleet. We only operate 86 buses on route daily, but those buses cover 300 to 1 routes a day. I'll tell you a little bit about funding of our electric fleet. We currently have 14 of the 16 school buses that we were awarded in the grant. We are running 8 E-Lions right now, and they are running on a regular basis. But on the funding side, things that we ran into with our project, we found that first of all we had to go get board permission to participate in the grant, and they were very, very enthusiastic about the fact that we had the potential of getting $7.8 million worth of funding. We had to file things like CEQA documents, and we had to get quotes. We had to file a sole source because at the time, the only buses available were the Lion buses and the Transtex. Otherwise, you would have to go out for bid or through the RFP process, and I will say that we are currently out to bid for alternative fuel buses, and the bid will be awarded to multiple vendors, and you'll be able to piggyback off that in the next few weeks. One of the other things that we had to do was we had to get board resolutions. Everybody was really willing to support us because we had, like, Mr. Cerna, sent a letter to our superintendent, which he announced to everybody and got everybody, really keyed up for it. When you look at the infrastructure and charging, if you're going to get a lot of school buses, you want to really work with your local utility district because they'll partner in with you. And just to give you an idea, SMUD, which is our local utility district, they actually funded all of the dollars that weren't covered under the grant. So close to $100,000 worth of funding. And all they required from us is that we put a sticker on the bus that said that we were partnered in with them. The other part about it is timelines. SMUD really was a good partner with us because typically it takes about a year to have new service put in with all the permitting, like for us, not permit by rule, but Rule 16. Rule 16 required that we get drawings and all of the internal stuff that they need, and then they go out and they go to their board and they get approval for it. But we were lucky enough to be able to expedite that. Even though we did run into some ditch problems with water in the ditch, we were able to get the project really up and going within 6 months. One of the things that I would suggest when you start looking at the electric school bus and how you're going to charge them is analyze your utility bill. We worked with a third-party company that got the information from SMUD, looked at what the power draw was going to be on the electric buses, and then determined what our best attack was with putting in the chargers. So we ended up going with 16 chargers. 8 of them are smart chargers, and the other 8 are, we call them dumb chargers. They don't really communicate with the bus, they just turn on and off. So those are things that you're going to have to look at. How much data you want to put together with your utility company, how much analyzing you want to do with your routing. But we were able to basically put this in with pretty much no cost to the district at all. And then you want to also, when you look at infrastructure and charging, look at future growth. Look at where you probably would, if you want to acquire more buses later on, don't just limit yourself to 1 or 2 buses, because this is the future of transportation for schools. One of the other portions that I want to share with you is the experience that the drivers had. Our drivers were pretty apprehensive about getting into this brand new bus that they do nothing about, but once they started driving them, they realized that it's a whole new experience. First of all, it's quiet, so all you hear is students. Second of all, the air conditioning units on them work better than any bus they've ever driven in their entire career. And the third thing is that it's very unique. Some of our one of the biggest factors we had was safety training, because the Lions make a kind of an ice cream truck sound when they go 15 miles an hour and lower, but faster you can't hear them. It's not like you can hear a big diesel bus going down the road. So we had to really familiarize the drivers with be very defensive when you drive these buses. Look out for your surroundings. When you pull up to a school site, make sure that people actually see you. So we put a big training program in with our trainer Nancy, and she really has created a heightened awareness to the drivers and to the surroundings. So we did some initial kind of site projects where we've taken the bus out to school sites, and the school sites really like them. But what really the drivers have been telling us is that students really like them. They think they're the greatest thing. Not only are they brand new, they're quiet, they can talk to their friends on the bus. It's really minimized a lot of turmoil on the bus. And one is student health. You know, they're not smelling that diesel smoke. It's been an overall really good experience for them.
We got a question that came in online for you.
Sure.
The question is, how did you decide what types of chargers to install, and what charger manufacturer did you use?
So how we decided was we had a lot of partners in this initial project to get it off the ground, because this was the first of its kind. For the Lion buses, we put in the BCT chargers. They're a 70 amp charger and a smart charger that was recommended by our electrician. And with the Transtech, since they use a different kind of coupler, we installed the Clipper Creek chargers, because the Transtech require 3-phase power.
They want to know, how did you obtain clearance from CHP to apply the SMUD partnership sticker?
So we actually have some of the old CNGs with the Pete Wilson stickers on them. It's a 12 by 12 sticker. So we did some research and found that in Title 13, there's a provision, as long as it's a partnership and not an advertisement. And so it's a partnership, and it's stating that it's benefiting the students because of clean air.
And how many miles do you get per charge?
We're getting about 96 miles per charge, and it takes approximately 4.5 to 5 hours on a charge.
So how does the lack of noise work around stops, students and parents?
So the students and parents really like it that it's quiet, because they can direct the kids, you know, into the bus. The one thing that's nice about the E-Lines is they make a singing sound. So basically it's the Montreal Transit train sound, so people know that the train's coming. So they're very aware of it, and we're actually thinking about, you know, changing the song up for a couple days and let the students pick the song, because it's an MP3 player. We are also going to be lobbying through with the CHP to actually add some code that requires that the buses make a sound, so that everybody there's this common sound. Everybody recognizes that the buses are arriving or departing.
And what company did you use to address EV load and capacity issues?
It actually was done through First Priority, which is the bus dealer, and they used a company called Consensium. And Consensium worked with us extensively on finding the right mix.
Have you been able to determine your kilowatt per mile efficiency yet?
So we're doing that studying right now, but I don't have those numbers, but I will share some other numbers with you. We did, for the last 2 months, we've done some comparison, electric fuel versus diesel fuel, and we are getting, we have a 82% savings over diesel fuel in the electric bus.
How much does it cost you to charge a bus for an average day of use compared to your diesel buses?
So I believe we were looking at $11 a day.
For the electric bus?
For the electric, for the E-Line. We don't have any numbers yet on the Transtech.
How about, what was it costing you to use your diesel buses on an average day?
I believe it's, 82% more than that.
Yeah. Are you working with motive power systems for some of these electric buses?
Yes, we are. Those are the Transtech buses.
And is there a resource where I can look up vendors that will work on the infrastructure with me?
So at this particular time, I only know of one, and that's Phil Hop Electric. But I did hear that there's some others getting involved in the projects.
The manufacturer will probably assist with that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know that they heard me.
Yeah, the manufacturer could probably assist you.
And how are your maintenance costs compared to your old diesel buses?
So I was talking with Ray, our maintenance guy, and he was telling me that it's about 60% less money on maintenance because they spend much less time on basically a PMI.
I'm not sure if you would have this answer, but someone wants to know how they would work, how an electric bus would work in a mountain community and power-wise to climb grade.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we'll hold that. Maybe we'll hold that question for our next presenter.
Very good.
Yeah. But and maybe this one is it's too early in the life of the buses here. But how are the batteries of electric vehicles disposed of?
So we do know that the way batteries are going now is that they will not really be disposed. They're going to have about 80% life in them after they are removed from the school bus, and they will be basically repurposed into power walls and for solar storage. Okay.
All right.
Well, it looks like that's all the questions at this point, but if you do have more questions for Tim, we can go ahead and address those after our next presenter. So we're going to go ahead and move on here. So thank you, everyone, for the questions that you sent in. So Patrick Cahill, is that correct?
Cahill.
Cahill,
Yeah.
okay. So Pat has been a school district transportation manager in the Sacramento area for 25 years. He's currently the director of transportation for Rescue Union School District, and his experience with electric buses began in the spring of 2017 with the application for the Rural School Bus Pilot Project and continued with the delivery of an electric bus in January 2018. So brand new to having electric buses in his fleet.
That's
so,
right. Yeah, our bus has only been in service now for just a couple of months, so we're excited. Anyway, hey,
perfect.
thanks for inviting me, Danielle. This is fun to be. Tim and I have talked a lot over the past year about the electric stuff, and we've talked a lot about too how our experiences are so completely different.
Yes.
And we'll talk about that in a second.
That's why it's so great for you to be here too, to give your input.
Yeah, thanks. Well, Sarah, let me just tell you a little bit about Rescue School District. We are, okay. Yes, we're a K-8 district. We're located just east of Sacramento in the foothills of El Dorado County. We've got 5 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and just over 3,700 students are enrolled in the district. Of those 3,700, we transport just under 600 students a day. Our fleet is a little bit smaller than Tim's. We've got 16 buses, which we have 9 routes. But the important thing is that the average age of our buses is 18 years old. We've actually got 8 of our 16 buses are pre-2000. They're 1990 era buses. So we were really excited to be able to jump on this funding opportunity that North Coast or the ARB came up with. So we got our funding through the Rural School Bus Pilot Project, and that was administered by the North Coast Air Quality Management District, like you mentioned. And dollar-wise, for this, we got up to $400,000 for the cost of the bus. Our bus ended up costing us about $416,000. We threw a few extra things on there, and then also for infrastructure, we got up to $5,000 for that. And the infrastructure actually costs a lot more than that. So for us, there's 2 separate pieces of the infrastructure. One is the electrical cost, and the other is just the charging station itself. So the electrical was just a little over 10,000. Charging station was just under 8. So actually, total out of pocket for the district was just under $30,000. $29,000. So as you can imagine, we were pretty excited about that. The application process, I just have to say, was without a doubt the easiest application I've ever had to deal with. It was all online. It is a bus replacement program, and they were just looking for the information on the bus that we wanted to replace. I actually had all that information already, in my transportation software. So it was just, filling out the application, hit send. It was great. Once we actually got the award, then we actually had to do some work. So we had to, get to them all the information about the bus, copies of the CHP 292, the registration, that kind of stuff. But again, it was very simple. We were provided with a checklist. they went so far as to provide a template for us for our board resolution. I mean, again, North Coast just couldn't have made it easier. The last thing we needed, though, was vendor quotes. And so we had to come up with 3, and again, that's kind of where we had to start making some decisions. What kind of bus did we want? That was the one quote. And the other 2 things were the electrical and the charger. So moving on to that. Actually, before I move on, though, I do just want to mention, working with North Coast was great. And I just have to say, Erin Squire was the point person for North Coast, and she just did a fabulous job, both in terms of customer service. I mean, she was very friendly and answered all of our questions, but did a great job professionally. I mean, really, crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's. So it was just a great experience all the way around. Okay, so for our infrastructure, we were told we needed like about a 400 amp panel to start with, and so here's a picture of the panel we were able to use and find. If you look through the slats in the fence, you can see the charging station, right behind it. So here's a Google view of our yard, and you can see that little charging panel right on the other side of the fence. So we back up to an elementary school, and that panel was already there servicing a couple portable classrooms. So that was fortunate for us, because I think a real expense in putting the electrical piece in is how far do you have to pull power from. If you're, Tim has a SMUD, we have PG&E, but if they have to come in and bring in electricity, it's going to be a lot more expensive. So, and then as Tim mentioned earlier too, when we're doing this, you want to be looking towards the future. So we had funding for 1 bus, but if you look along that fence line, we've got 5 stalls there. So we're pretty much set up to be able to, to put in the infrastructure for 4 more buses. So here's a final look at the charging station we put in. As you can see, we put it in, in between 2 buses, between 2 stalls. And if you look down at the bottom, to the right there, you can see a little pipe coming up. We've already had it stubbed out, for another charger in case that opportunity came up. And that was good, because last month we found out that, in fact, we've been granted another award through North Coast, and we are getting another bus. So by having it already stubbed out, we've already saved ourselves lots of dollars. The company, Tim was talking about working with different companies. So EV Connect is the company that we got our charging station from. But it's more importantly, the charger management system. This picture is just a quick shot of what I look at online when I go to check out the details of our charger. And it gives you so much information. As we said, I've only had the bus for a couple of months. I really haven't had time to really get into it and get the details. But a fun part of this is just the state of the art that's going on with this. This is all Wi-Fi through this charger. We can turn this charger on, turn it off. Actually, I can do that from my cell phone if I needed to. Lastly, I got that little bullet there of the charger program for cost minimization. That's just a fancy way of saying that we can program it to charge when the electricity is the cheapest. So even though when the driver gets back in the yard at 4 o'clock and they plug the bus in, that at 4 o'clock the electricity is a lot cheaper, a lot more expensive than it is at 9 o'clock. So we've got it programmed to turn on at 9 o'clock, and so that way we're just that cost effectiveness there. So the electric bus, we went with the E-Line like Tim did. Here's just a shot of the bus that we got. It's a 65-passenger conventional, and we've been very happy with it. It's a well-built bus. It's meeting our needs. All right, so our experience. As I mentioned, we are rural, and we're located in the foothills. The main roads for our district that our buses are traveling on are 45 to 55 mile per hour roads, and our routes average 30 to 40 miles in the morning and 30 to 40 miles in the afternoon. So the electric bus really works for us. Our routes, as I said, the drivers, when they get back in the yard, they plug the bus in. So we're able to get a charge midday and then again in the evening. I haven't timed to see how long it actually takes, for the bus to actually charge, but I know that it's at 100% charge before it goes out its afternoon run, and then again in the morning. It's coming in off of its runs typically right around with about a 50% charge. So and it's looking like right now that we're averaging quite a bit less than Tim is averaging. We're getting about 60 to 70 miles per charge. But that's exactly what in the area of what I was expecting to get. With Twin Rivers, they've they're flat. They're in the city. We are in the foothills, and we're doing lots of hills, and we're doing probably a little bit higher speeds too when we get out onto the rural roads. So the expectation wasn't for us to be getting that kind of mileage, but this still works perfect for us. As I said, with our average routes being 30 to 40 miles, we're not encountering any range anxiety at all. The drivers, they like it. What's not to like? It's new. As I said, our fleet's pretty old, and there's a shot of some smiling faces. Some of the adjectives they're using is it's smooth, it's quiet, it's comfortable, and the AC. It's the only bus in our fleet with air conditioning, so they're pretty excited about that.
If I somebody who gets drive this one.
Yeah. Training. That's a little screenshot there of the display in the bus. You can see there's quite a bit of information there. It's different kinds of things, that the drivers are normally looking at, in their diesel bus. So we take some time, with their training. It's not your average proficiency training that you would do, with a driver in a new bus. We really take some time to get them to understand, what's going on charging wise, and just how the bus works, where's all the shutoffs and that kind of thing. Getting them acclimated to driving the electric vehicle is something that does take a little bit. Tim mentioned that drivers are at first a little bit hesitant, and that's true. It's this newness. It is so quiet when you drive it. There is an awareness that the drivers have to have. When students are around it and it's going slow, like I mentioned, it's got that ice cream truck sound to it. So in fact, we kind of reprogrammed ours so that anytime you put it into gear, up until 20 miles per hour, it's making that noise so that anybody around it, can hear it. Well, let's see, what else I want to mention about, the other thing about the driver training piece of it and out on the road is we really want to take advantage of the braking, the regenerative braking. They say that we should be able to, get about 15% additional charge through regenerative braking. But that's not something you really get to see as you're driving down the road. You're not going to see that your percentage go up typically. You can feel it. The regenerative braking actually feels much like a retarder. But we want the drivers to be aware of that. Our driver trainer, Dee Spillers, and myself, we took the bus outside of our district up a steep hill that's close to us called Marshall Grade. It's a 9% 3-mile grade, and we got up to the top of that and we were at 70%. And when we came down that hill, when we got to the bottom of the hill, we were at 75%. We actually got to watch the energy being generated, and that was really significant for us, and actually I thought pretty dramatic. So, and I've had in talks with the drivers, you're able to look at the gauge and see how much energy you're using as you accelerate, and they're kind of excited about paying attention to that and really getting the most out of it. And I think down the road, and right now we're just focusing on getting used to it, but down the road we'll be able to focus more on really being as efficient as possible. Hey, and last, the community loves it. This is obviously an easy sell with the school board. They love the idea. I mean, who's not going to love getting a $400,000 grant, of course? But it wasn't just that. It was just being part of the whole electric vehicle push. One of the school board members, asked me, boy, are we the first school district in the county to get this? And I said, well, yes, we are, but not just the county. We're one of the first in the state, and actually in the whole country is where it's really kind of leading. So that was nice. a quick little story, if we've got time. I was over at the district office walking through, and one of the ladies in payroll said, "Hey, when do we get to go for a ride?" And so I thought, a great idea. So we set up a time a week later for them to go for a ride. We went over, and I expected 5 or 6 people to come out and go for a ride. The entire district office came out, from the superintendent on down. Everybody came out. They had to draw straws to see who was going to be left behind to answer phones. So yeah, everybody's excited about it. Well, we had an opportunity to have the fire department come out and take a look at it. As first responders, we thought that was pretty important. And about a week later, I looked up and I saw a fire truck coming into the yard. It was the guys that happened to be off duty while the other guys got to come take a look at it. They wanted to see it too. So the community likes it. And then, last but not least, really kind of comes down to the kids. Bottom line, it's easy to get caught up in the business of the whole thing, but is it good for the kids? And I don't know if it's just because it is new, but the kids like it, and certainly some of the middle school kids, they kind of really enjoy the idea that it's all electric, and that really is the most important part. And looking, as you, Danielle, mentioned early on, just the health benefits. I mean, how can it not be good to have zero-emission vehicles around our kids? And, really, not just the kids, but the communities that it's driving through. So that's our experience with it so far. Here's my information. If you have any questions or, like to ask anything later, I'd be more than happy to talk to you. So thanks.
We already have some questions for you. So, I think you already addressed how they would work in a mountain community and power-wise to climb grades with your example.
Right. Well, sure. a little more detail. I have to say, where we're operating the bus, there's a little bit of a plateau where we are. So it's not like we're operating in steep mountains. And they're really, the other districts in our county, they're kind of taking a look at this, but they weren't feeling, that it might necessarily work for them. So it really is just, how many hills do you have? It's going to be kind of an experimentation thing.
Okay. And the next question is, how does the cold weather affect the bus in colder areas, so i.e. mountain areas? I'm not sure how cold it gets up where you are, but is there a way to warm the bus so it's not so cold before driving it?
Oh, perfect question. Actually, when we first put the bus into service, it was during a cold spell. It was like coming to work in the morning, it was 28 degrees a couple times. And I think, and I really don't have enough data to say exactly how much the cold affects, like in terms of energy usage or that, but I think certainly it does a little bit. In terms of the bus itself being warm, in fact, when we just got this worked out with programming, there's actually a feature on this bus. When the bus is plugged in, we can program the heater to come on earlier. So when the driver comes into work, the bus is already, on the inside, is already warm. And now I'd say, well, and another piece of this, a completely different topic really is, I think we have to realize that this is all new technology. And, whether, we've had a few charging issues, but then they've all been fixed with programming, or maybe a motherboard needed to be changed out. But there's just a lot of learning going on, and this was one. The bus was supposed to be able to program it. The first time we did it, it worked great. The blowers came on, but the heater wasn't coming on, so we had to go back and then. But we got it working. It was kind of fun now, because it was just this Monday where I jumped in the bus. We programmed it over the weekend, jumped in the bus Monday morning, and it was warm. And it sure put a smile on the driver's face.
You guys get to single-digit weather? Because we got a question from Truckee saying they get down to single-digit weather. Have you had any?
No, we don't. No, high 20s would be. In fact, high 20s would be about the coldest it's going to get for us.
Might have to program it to come on a little earlier to get those temperatures up. Okay, so the next one is, you said that you put some extra things on the bus that made it cost $416,000. What were those things? And then secondly, if you know, without those added items, what would the cost of the bus would have been?
Well, a couple of the extra things. The biggest one was air conditioning. Air conditioning was 15,000, so that really worked right there. Oh boy, I added. There was a panel with pockets in it for the driver. You know, there was a couple $100. We did put in the right front seat, the child safety seat with the little fold-down child seats in there. I think those are an extra 500. I'm guessing. I hope my memory is correct there. And I did talk the district into splurging on aluminum wheels, so that was a few extra $1,000. But I think that the weight difference was worth it. So yeah, with those dollars, so yeah, I think easily you can get under 400,000.
And then how many buses can be charged at one time with the charging station?
Charging station can charge just one at a time.
Okay.
You know, I guess they have charging stations where there's charge at a much slower rate, and so we didn't want to go that direction. We want one charger at a time.
And then have you considered doing two-way vehicle to grid charging?
Well, they've talked about that as being something to do. I think that's more down the road. We don't really have that capability at the moment, but I see that definitely as something down the road to do.
Tim, is that something that you have?
Yeah, we're just waiting on our electric company, and Lion does have the equipment to go V to G. So as soon as SMUD is ready to do it, and they're talking a couple of years out, but they have to figure out a way to manage it, but definitely because it's a way to offset some of the cost of owning a more expensive bus.
So they want to know if you're interested in adding any more electric buses.
Absolutely.
I guess that could be for both of you.
Yeah.
Yes. We are going to add more. We have money in our budget for next year, and we've applied for some grants, and we're going to apply for more. And we're going to get as many as we can, and we're going to look at putting infrastructure in at remote sites so that we have less deadhead time, and we're able to utilize the buses for even more applications, like field trips.
And then you said you already were granted
That's correct.
Did you already
we've got funding for one more bus now. It's still on the process. You know, Aaron's working on that right now, getting the contract sent out to us, and then after that, so that would give us two. Absolutely, I could use two more. We have 4 routes for sure that it would work on, and I think there's a real possibility that it could work for all 8 of our routes. But I have to keep in mind that, you know, these are really only good for home to school. And we have to keep buses, you know, around for field trips. You know, we go to San Francisco, we go to Sonora, we go around, and plus we need our buses in the middle of the day to be able to go to field trips. So, they're never going to be, well, I can't say never, but right now, it wouldn't be something where they'd be all of our fleet.
and then how was the bus dealer experience in helping you through the process of deploying the new technology?
Actually, yeah, that process has been good for me. It's so new, everybody's really excited about it. So whether it's the people with the charging station, you know, or the for Lion, or the gentlemen from Lion themselves, I've been working with all of them. It's been good.
Yeah, very good. It's been a pleasure to work with everybody. Everybody's so excited about it that it's happening, and you know, we talked about it for years. You know, 2015 we were talking about it, and everybody's just gung ho about, you know, pitching in whatever we need to make it work.
And then this one, how do you deal with mechanical issues on the electric buses? Are your mechanics being trained on working on the electric vehicles, or do you plan to use the dealership?
I can answer that one for both of us, Ken. I will tell you, currently, we work through first priority in their group because these buses are warranted for 5 years. So, but we are going to be training our staff. They're learning more and more about them. We are also working with a American River College in developing a training course for bus mechanics on the electric side, and we have it running through our career and technical education at our high school. So we're trying to develop more and more mechanics, but we're working directly with the vendors also.
Yeah, when it comes to the electrical side of it, absolutely, that's a line or FPG thing. But you got to keep in mind too, the rest of it, a bus is a bus, and so our mechanics were, we had a door that was out of adjustment, and the guys got in there, and fixed that, and that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just going back to what Danielle kind of covered earlier with the Prop 39 funds, one of the proposals is that they have a workforce training component to that funding source as well. So that's something to keep an eye on if you're looking at that there is a proposal to have some workforce training.
All right. Well, I think that we've addressed the questions that have come in here. I don't know if either of you know the expected lifespan of the batteries or the estimated cost of battery replacement. Have you done research on that?
So the current batteries that we have, when we initially got them, they were saying from 5 to 7 years lifespan. Mm-hmm. And looking at the price a few years ago was about $52,000. Mm-hmm. But as we know that the price of battery technology, it's getting cheaper and cheaper all the time. So we're hoping that it gets down to about $20,000 when it's replacement time.
And then someone said that the question may have already be asked, but what was the fuel cost savings versus the electricity costs on an annual basis, if you have that?
So we only have the monthly basis at this time for January and February that we've taken a look at, and it is 82% savings. Okay. And when we're going to start charging only in the lowest tier for Sacramento, I've been told we're going to be able to save another 20% in electrical savings.
So, and that's, so here in Sacramento, it's very different for us. And I don't have the detailed numbers, but I just know some of the dollar differences. I think, Tim, you were mentioning that your kilowatt per hour is 9 cents per kilowatt per hour.
Yeah.
So that's a SMUD. We're in PG&E. Our off-peak rate is 19 cents per mile, or 19 cents per kilowatt hour. Our mid-time rate, which is our midday when we're charging, is 22 cents. And then if we charge during peak rates, it's 26 cents. So that's a difference. And then also, we're getting a lot less miles, per charge. So our cost saving isn't going to be that great. Again, I don't have the numbers, but I think it's going to be more around just probably a little under 50%. Mm-hmm. But I have to admit, I'm just guessing here.
There's a question came in that in case of disaster, the vehicle is capable of providing power to the schools.
So we are looking at that. We're looking at that as a source. I will be working with talking with Lion about that. Mm-hmm. That subject has come up because it would be nice to be able to plug the bus in and generate some power in the event of a power outage for the schools.
That's that whole vehicle to grid thing.
Absolutely.
And yep, that technology's there. We don't have it yet, but it's coming.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion I've heard lately about like disaster preparedness and schools being one of the kind of main focus, especially with the advance in the vehicles. All right. Well, we are coming to a close here on the questions and comments that have come through. If we haven't been able to respond to your comments and questions, then we will be following up via email for the individuals that have sent them. I think that we've got through most of them at this point, and we are right at 12 o'clock. So we are going to be wrapping up. But we really do thank everyone for joining us, and we really thank Patrick and Tim for being here today and sharing their experience. I think that's been a very eye-opening and interesting way to hear about the electric vehicle. So thank you for taking the time to put together your presentations and be here. We really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, and everyone online, thank you so much for coming. As you close out of GoToWebinar, you are going to be prompted with a quick survey about the webinar, how it was for you, what you'd like to see more of in the future. And if you could provide feedback on that, we will most definitely take it into account with future offerings and what types of things you want to see in terms of webinars and training. So with that, we are going to be closing off here. And once again, thank you to everyone for participating today.